Hello all, I'm Sai and you're watching The Book Dragon. In today's video, I'm bringing to you my first ever original book tag. Since we are all still in the middle of a pandemic, I've been missing my daily routine a lot what I used to have while I was traveling to work. I and my brother, we sat down together and we brought up 7 questions which go in with reading and something that we do throughout the day in our daily routine. So there are totally 7 questions in this tag and I'll drop all of them in the description below. So if you're watching this video, please do let me know your answers because I'd like to know them. And if you're a booktuber yourself, feel free to do a video on this one. And yeah, let's just get into the questions right away. So the first question in the daily routine book tag, commute to work, something to start the day with. What kind of book do you like to start your day with while you're commuting? I usually commute by train and I always prefer to read some kind of non-fiction book, especially self-help when it comes to morning, because morning is the time during which I'm mentally so active and I'll be able to absorb everything that I read. So fiction is not that much of a preference for me when it comes to morning, and I always prefer to read non-fiction and specifically self-help in the morning because I'm a person who likes to develop myself a lot in various streams and various spheres. So self-help does help me a lot in that. I'll not be able to incorporate everything that I read in my life, but even if I'm able to incorporate like 2 or 3% of the book that I read in my life, it's always enriching for me. So I always prefer to read non-fiction books specifically in the morning. Question number 2, commute from work, something to unwind. The kind of book which I usually prefer to read to unwind from a very busy day at work is contemporary books. Either it's young adult contemporary or adult contemporary. I don't have a preference of the two, but I generally lean into young adult because it's even more fun for me compared to adult books. I'm not saying that as a con or a bad thing about adult books in any ways. And always when I've had a busy day, I want to take something light. If I go to fantasy, there's a lot of world building and magic and all those things which I love, but I want to pay attention and read them with my full focus. But that's not that much necessary when it comes to contemporary books. I can just go with the flow and enjoy them as they are without paying that much attention and being that much invested in the story, but getting entertained a lot. So I always prefer contemporary books in order to unwind from a busy day. Question number 3, a busy commute, something amidst distractions and disturbances. I always prefer to read romance books when it comes to traveling in a busy train or any other vehicle like that, because romance also is something which is very much fun for me to read, and I don't usually read that much romance. And also when I commute, most of the time it's always a busy commute because there's a lot of crowd where I live in Chennai, and all the trains here during the work time, that is between 9 and 6, are always jam-packed and it's not that easy to find a seat itself. So most of the time I end up standing for half the time while I commute, either to or fro. But during those times I just pop in my headphones and listen to audiobooks because I cannot pay attention to physically reading a book, either it's a physical book or an ebook, while I'm hearing other people's voices inside my head. So I always prefer to pop in my headphones and listen to an audiobook while I'm on a busy commute, and it's mostly romance because it doesn't require that much attention from me, and also it keeps my mind off all the commotion that's around me, and it's just fun to do it that way. Question number 4, stuck in traffic, something to lower the annoyance. This is something which I don't get to experience a lot of times because I commute to train and there's not that much traffic when it comes to trains. It's very rare that my train stops due to some technical problems on the line or something like that, and during those times I always prefer to read some book which is totally focused on comedy rather than anything else. And the type of books which I prefer within the comedy genre also are books which have a group of friends doing something, because when there's a banter of friends that's working out together, there's always going to be some amount of humor in the story no matter what happens, and I always like reading such stories when I'm annoyed and I want to take my mind off that situation and just feel some fun and some comfort. So comedy is a genre that I prefer when it comes to being stuck in a traffic and in order to get my annoyance level down. Question number 5, during exercise, something to read when you're physically active but mentally not. I usually prefer to read literary fiction when I'm doing some kind of exercise, and the only kind of exercise that I do is walking. I make it a point to walk for at least 1 hour daily during some part of the day when I can fit in that time, and I always listen to an audiobook then also, because it's not possible for me to read a physical book when I'm walking because it always disturbs me a lot, and I'm also wearing glasses, so it'll be harder on my eyes than it normally is. So I pop in my headphones and listen to an audiobook that time also, and mostly I prefer to read literary fiction then, because literary fiction is a lot more realistic compared to contemporary stories which I read, either adult or young adult, because literary fiction is just something which we see in our daily lives from the people that we actually know, and there's no fantastic element added to the story, and that there is nothing out of the world. It's everything that's happening in our reality but that we don't get to see that many times, either good things or bad things. And I always prefer to spend that amount of time during which I'm not that much mentally active reading literary fiction, because it's just even more informative and it helps me to develop my empathy a lot more. Question number 6, Mellow, lull, something to give you sweet dreams. And here is my most favorite genre of all the books that I read. You can just see my shelf and find it out. My favorite genre, as most of you know if you've been following me already, is fantasy. I'd rather read a fantasy than sleep, if you ask me, because that kind of investment is not provided by any other genre for me except fantasy, because it's just so immersive in every experience. If you ask me, I don't bother if it's any type of fantasy. It can be high fantasy, it can be very complex politically driven fantasy, it can be just an urban fantasy, or it can be a hard magic system, soft magic system. I don't care. If it's fantasy and if it's written well, I'll just be into it. Even if the story is not that great and the writing is very beautiful and the world is built in a proper way by the author, I prefer to read that kind of books before I go to sleep, because that's the time during which I just move on from this literal world, which sucks most of the time, and get into some place which I feel safe and secure and comfy. And I'd like to fall asleep reading some fantasy after reading some fantasy rather than reading some other genre of books, because that's my sweet spot and I enjoy it always. Question number 7, a bad day, something that lights up your day. The kind of book which I usually like to read after having a very bad day or a hard day is nice, heavy, high fantasy books, because the amount of immersiveness the worlds provide when it comes to high fantasy and epic fantasy is something which is irreplaceable for me as a reader during this part of my life. And I always prefer to read nice, hefty, thick fantasy books while I've had a bad day, because usually anything that's related to a reality, it can pull strings and just put me into a thought spiral if I'm in a bad mood. But when it comes to high fantasy or epic fantasy books, it's mostly not like that, because the world itself is something which I find myself very much comfortable and in my skin always. Though it's not a real world, it's total fiction. I'm always a person who prefers fantasy over any other genre. Okay, let it even be a story which sucks but it has beautiful characters and a beautiful world. I'd rather read a fantasy than a book which has an excellent plot and very beautiful characters which is not fantasy. It always gets me very well out of a bad day. Okay guys, that was my first original book tag video and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave your answers in the comments below, because I'd like to know them a lot. And if you did enjoy watching today's video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also share it to your friends. If you want to get more content from me, do subscribe to the channel, because I publish new videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.